So how's everybody this week? Everybody still doing great? So glad to see you all hanging in there and still coming every week and still doing so great. So anyway, tonight we're going to talk about metabolism, and the name of the class is called Burn Fat Faster. And it's just all about those little tricks of the trade that can help boost your fat burning speed and increase your metabolism and make things go along smoother for you. So before I even start with that kind of stuff, obviously the most important things are to cut your calories and to increase your exercise. We know that, and that's what we hit right off the bat. We make sure we get those under control. And then as we go on, we share more tips and tricks with you. So this is kind of like the class that we put it all together in one package for you. And you'll hear some new things probably we haven't talked about to this point. But these are, as I said, these are just all those things that can prevent a person from making progress. And I can tell you, after years of doing this, I hear a lot of the same kind of situations over and over again. I'll talk to people who are members at the gym who say, I've been a member here for years. I come to work out 3 times a week. I'm regular in my workouts. I feel like I eat well, but my weight doesn't budge no matter what I do. And so many times, just by looking at all these little things we're going to talk about tonight, those are the things that pull it all together and can get people over the hump. So if you feel like you're kind of struggling and there are a few things that you just can't quite get the pounds off as quick as you'd like, maybe there's some things here that you could take into consideration. So we're going to talk about 10 specific techniques, and what you can do is kind of use these 10 as like your goal sheet or your checklist. As we talk about those, just kind of mentally go check, 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 yeah, I'm doing that. Okay, this I need to work on. So you sort of have a game plan of what you need to accomplish. So let's go ahead and just start with number 1 on the list, which says jumpstart your metabolism with a healthy breakfast every day. And we've talked about breakfast before, the fact that it's so important, and we know that. We've heard it all our lives. It's important, but just from a weight loss standpoint alone, it's critical. And I think we've talked about this before, but let me just review it again just so we're all kind of refreshed on this. When you wake up in the morning after being asleep all night long, if you sleep a normal night's sleep, you've been asleep 8 hours, which is a third of your 24-hour day. So that, a third of your day, you had nothing to eat, no fuel coming in your system at all, but yet you're still metabolizing calories. You're still burning fat and burning calories throughout the night at a lower rate than you do during the day, but certainly a significant amount. So when we wake up in the morning, every one of us is absolutely running on empty. Our tank is empty, we're pulling on reserves just to get us going. So if you wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to go about my daily activities but skip breakfast, you put a huge demand on your body to go with nothing, essentially. So when that happens, what your body does is it just slows down. The metabolism just drops down to a lower level and stays lower all day long. And if you skip breakfast, no matter what else you do all day, no matter how much you exercise, no matter what you eat, no matter what else you do, rather than being up here like your metabolism should be, it's going to be down a few notches for the whole day. So you really don't save yourself any calories at all by skipping breakfast. And I know it's kind of a common thing for people to say, well, if I skip breakfast, I'm not so hungry during the day, I can save a few hundred calories. So I feel like that's an easy way for me to do it because I'm not hungry at breakfast. But the deal is it comes back to get you later. And one of the ways it comes back is that your metabolism drops, so you're burning fewer calories all throughout the day. And then by skipping breakfast, you're hungrier later in the day. Like your afternoon and evening hunger is way, way more than it would be had you eaten breakfast. And that's really the main reason that people overeat at night. That they eat dinner, they go home and they finally have a good meal, but that's not satisfying. They want more after dinner. A few hours later, they're hungry again, and you tend to snack at night and all that kind of thing. So part of that nighttime snacking is just habit over the years, but the hunger part of it is because of not eating enough during the day. So I always tell people, start your day off good, eat well throughout the day, and then in the afternoon and evening, that's when you can start to ease off a little bit. Not to say that you should go home and eat a piece of lettuce, but that you'll eat a lighter dinner. You'll have a dinner and you'll enjoy it and you'll be hungry for it, but it'll be a lighter kind of thing. So we're setting the tone for the day by eating breakfast. And studies have actually shown that when you put people on a calorie level, like say every single one of you, we put you all on the same calorie level, and we said, okay, this half of the room you eat breakfast, this half of the room you don't, but over the course of the day you're going to get the same amount of calories. The breakfast eaters are going to lose a third more weight than the non-breakfast eaters. So how are you guys doing now with your breakfast? Any of you who were not breakfast eaters before who are now eating breakfast? Okay, I saw a few hands go up. That's great. Great, good. Big improvements, breakfast and lunch. Okay, so keep that in mind. And if you're not there yet, just keep working on that one. So second on the list is refill your fuel tank every 3 to 4 hours. So that's just the regular pattern. And for those of you who have had children, sorry, these braces are still killing me. I still haven't learned how to talk. So for those of you who have had children, you know that when your children are young, they need to eat often. And as infants, every 3 hours typically, because their little teeny stomachs get empty and they need to be full again. Well, as an adult, we have a bigger capacity, but we still need to be fed every 3 to 4 hours to stoke that fire. So when we talk about metabolism, just keep that vision in your mind of a fire burning, because that's what's going on inside. And just like a fire, the only way to keep that thing burning is to throw a log on it, and to throw the right log on it, not just a little stick or a little twig that's going to let it sputter and then go out again, but to put a decent sized log on that fire so it can burn and it can metabolize some calories for you. So every 3 to 4 hours is the proper amount of time. After about the 4-hour mark, what happens is that fire starts to go down and your metabolism starts to go down. So you want to keep your metabolism at a nice high level all day rather than taking little dips and ups and downs throughout the day. Just keep it high all day long. And that's why we say you need to eat snacks. Number 3, we're talking about water drinking here, keeping your body well hydrated. Water is the thing above all else that the human body depends on more than anything else. And you all have heard, I'm sure, that you can go without food for quite a long time, but you can't go without water for very long at all because your body has such a huge need for it. And for those of you who had your body composition done, and I think most of you in this room have, you know there's a number down at the bottom of your report that tells you how much water is on your body. And it's going to be about 50% of your body weight, which is huge. I mean, you look at yourself and you don't look all that watery, but 50% of your weight is water. And that tells you that your body uses water for virtually every single metabolic reaction that takes place in your body. Everything. It's almost like a fuel, even though it's not really a fuel. It's got to be there in order for things to happen in your body. So if water is used for everything, then what happens if you're dehydrated a little bit? Then you're running on a reduced capacity. And the end result of that is what your body's going to do is it's going to take what water it's got, which isn't enough if you're dehydrated, and it's going to take that water and do what it absolutely must do to keep you alive. And your body is amazing at prioritizing and doing that kind of thing. So the water will be used to do all these core functions that your body has to do, but those the things that you would like to have happen, like have energy and to be able to focus and concentrate and to lose weight and burn fat, those go on the back burner because those aren't life-demanding processes. That's kind of fluff. So once you become well hydrated again, then your body starts to burn fat at a much faster rate because water is part of that fat burning equation. And I think we talked about before that everything that happens in your body is really just a series of chemical reactions, of molecules and chemicals and all this stuff happening. And water is an essential part of that process. So you'll find that when you start drinking more water, or you have found by now that by drinking more water, the weight loss process is a lot easier. So if you're not there yet, if you're not up to your full amount of water, which is half your body weight, whatever you weigh right now, half of that should be how many ounces of water you drink every day. So if you're not there yet, keep working on that because that's a very effective, very important one to do. Number 4, allow at least 3 hours between your last feeding and bedtime. So for some people that might be your last meal. Like in my case, I go to bed about 10 o'clock at night, so when I eat my dinner, there's no time for a snack. That's about 3 to 4 hours between my dinner and bedtime. But if I were a night owl and stayed up till midnight, then it would be appropriate for me to have a snack about 9 o'clock. So, it just depends on how your day goes, when you go to bed, what you get up, all that kind of thing. But it's the 3 to 4 hour mark. Not that dinner has to be your last meal, but what you eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed is the last feeding. And that should be something light. If you go to bed fairly early like I do, a light dinner is appropriate. If you go to bed late, a light dinner and a snack is appropriate. Okay, let's talk about alcohol now. That's number 5 on the list. And there are several reasons that we need to think about alcohol as far as fat burning and metabolism and that kind of thing. So what is it that you know about alcohol that might be a factor when it comes to losing weight? Calories, absolutely. That's a big one. So let's talk about calories for a second. Does anybody remember how many calories are in carbohydrate? It's 4 calories per gram. And as you know, a gram is just a unit of weight. And like those little small paper clips, they weigh about a gram. So let's say we're going to line up some paper clips here. And the first one is carbohydrate, and it's going to have 4 calories. The next one is protein. Protein also has 4 calories per gram. So it's identical to carbohydrate and calorie content. Fat, on the other hand, has 9 calories per gram. So fat is over twice as fattening as carbohydrate and protein. So for that reason, that's why we always say cut the fat out of your diet when you're trying to lose weight, because the fat isn't going to fill you up anymore. If you put butter on that toast, it doesn't make the toast bigger. When you put butter on the baked potato doesn't get bigger. It tastes different, but it's still that same size of food going into your stomach. So, you get a lot of calories and it doesn't add any more filling power to it. So that's the deal about fat. But then we go on to alcohol, and even though alcohol is not a food and it's not a nutrient, it does contain calories. And there's nothing else that provides calories at all other than those 4 things. Carbohydrate, protein, fat, and alcohol are the only calorie-containing substances. Any guesses how many calories alcohol might have per gram? 9? You're close, 7. So it's not quite as fattening as fat, but it's pretty darn close. So as you said, from the calorie standpoint alone, and you pour that little glass of white wine and it's all clear and clean looking, and you just can't imagine that it's loaded with as many calories, but alcohol is loaded. Okay, what else besides the calorie content? Anything else about it that you know? It stimulates your appetite. It's an appetite stimulant, absolutely. And it lowers your inhibitions and your willpower. So they're again more likely to eat more if your willpower is kind of eroded a little bit. What else about alcohol?
Dehydrates you?
It does, Mm-hmm. It's also, I'm sure as you all know, a central nervous system depressant. So as long as alcohol's in our system, we're slowed down even more until the alcohol gets metabolized and leaves the system. One other thing. Sugar, well, yeah, that's a factor too that metabolizes into sugar. Ever heard of the beer gut? And we joke about it, and it's kind of a funny thing, but there's a lot of reality to that. Alcohol inhibits the release of fat from the abdominal area. So, right here in the middle where the beer gut is, and that's an absolute true fact. That normally, although it doesn't seem like it, your fat that you store around your middle area is very mobile. It's moving in and out, and it's leaving and going through the body and coming back. And, it doesn't ever seem to change, but yet during the day it's just always on the move. Whereas lower body fat is very stable. It doesn't move around much. It kind of gets there and it stays there till you burn it off. But the abdominal fat becomes much more stable in the presence of alcohol. And that's why, we joke about the beer gut, because sometimes some people who do drink alcohol pretty regularly, they'll have a gut where they may be slim everywhere else in their body, but they have this little thing that may or may not be caused by alcohol, but that's certainly a factor. So a few good reasons to watch that. And then too, we talk about not eating a lot of calories at night. That's the time, if you're going to have a glass of wine, it's probably the time, right, when you're sitting down at dinner, or maybe before dinner. So maybe you should have it for breakfast, right? You think? Just kidding, just kidding.
So can you get that clear?
So just be careful about it. Okay, let's talk about stress. Stress is next on the list, and this is something that we deal with day in and day out, and we absolutely pay a price for it in many, many ways. In our health, and our mental state, our weight, we pay a big price for the stress that we live with. When your body's under stress, there are certain stress hormones that are produced, and there are a number of those. But the one that causes the most damage is one called cortisol. And I know a lot of you probably know about cortisol, you've heard of it, you know a little bit about what it does. But for those of you who may not know, cortisol is a stress hormone, and one of the things it does is it raises your blood sugar very rapidly. So in times of danger, we call it the fight or flight hormone, that when danger approaches, your adrenal glands secrete out cortisol, which immediately raises your blood sugar. And as you all know, sugar is quick energy. So if you've got sugar rushing into your bloodstream, you have a lot of quick energy available to fight or flee, the fight or flight kind of thing. Obviously, in today's world, we don't deal with the kind of stressors our ancestors did. We talk about running from saber-toothed tigers and all that kind of thing. We don't do that, but we may have a saber-toothed boss, or a saber-toothed neighbor, or those nasty drivers that are idiots on the road that cut us off, and all these things that make us mad and stress us out. And sure, it's not a physical danger, but it's the same stress response. Your body does the same thing when you're mad at somebody versus being afraid and running for your life. So if you're stressed out during the day because of too much work, frustrations, people aggravating you, you're going to have chronically high cortisol levels in your blood, which means chronically high blood sugar levels. Now, another thing about cortisol is it's a powerful appetite stimulant. And cortisol lingers in the bloodstream for hours after it's secreted. So just imagine this scenario. Let's say that after class tonight, you're driving home and some idiot driver cuts in front of you and you almost have an accident, or you do have an accident like Danielle did last week. And your heart's racing and you're going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And so you kind of settle down, and by the time you get home, you're over the worst of the stress. So you walk in and you're kind of over it, and maybe you're going to walk in and talk about it, but you're pretty much over it. But you're ravenous. You walk in the door and you're starving. That's the cortisol talking. It's making you really, really hungry. And as I said, it lingers for hours after the time that your mental stress has gone down. So it's still affecting you. And that's why when people are under chronic stress, one of the reasons that they overeat. One of the reasons is just simply an emotional response. It's comfort, when we're stressed, but the other is absolutely a physical hunger that's with us. And so you can go through a stressful period in your life, and you can not change your eating habits at all, not change your exercise habits a lot, but you can get fatter as a result of that. Because as the cortisol raises the blood sugar, it slows down the rate that your body burns fat, and it speeds up the rate that your body stores fat. So with all that going on, you're actually gaining more fat tissue without doing anything different in your life. And that's why we really, really want to watch our stress levels, as much as we can. And obviously you can't eliminate it completely, but whatever you can do to manage it to some degree, to lessen it to some degree. And I know you've heard people talk about techniques to lower your stress, like taking a deep breath or counting backwards from 10, or any of those kind of silly little exercises. Well, the reason those things work so well is because the emotional part of your brain is the part that feels stress. The logical part of your brain is the part that counts. You can't do both at the same time. Psychologists say the brain doesn't operate that. It's on a one-track thing. It either feels emotion, or it feels logic, or it thinks about one thing and then it thinks about another. It may seem like you're doing a lot of things simultaneously because your brain can switch back and forth really fast, but it really can only be on one thing at a time. So when you're under stress, if you just remember to do some of those silly things like count backwards from 10 or spell something, do something that's a logical thing, it takes you off that emotional and forces you on the logical and keeps you there. And so you just keep reminding yourself, count, 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 spell, spell, spell. And that way the stress level can come down or maybe not get up to the level that it would have. So that's why those things work. So keep those in mind whenever you feel like you're getting stressed. Just do a little thing that diverts your mind off that emotional part of it. Now we're going to talk about sleep. And that's also something that has suffered tremendously in the life we live today. So many of us are so busy now that we're staying up later than we really should because we have things to do, things to accomplish before we go to bed. Because we've gone to bed so late, we're tired in the morning and we have to set an alarm clock to wake us up. Our bodies aren't waking up on their own at the appropriate time. And when we wake up, we're tired. We're dragging through the first few hours, just forcing ourselves to get going. And that's kind of the way a lot of people live now. So the result of that is a lot the same as when you're under stress. Again, cortisol levels rise significantly when we're sleep deprived. So what's sleep deprivation? Sleep deprivation is lack of sleep. Any guesses as to how many hours of sleep constitutes sleep deprivation? Less than 5. Actually less than 7. And I bet a lot of people in this room get less than 7 hours of sleep a lot of nights. But that's been shown over and over and over again in sleep research. And interestingly, there's been a lot of sleep research in recent years. It's kind of the new thing. And they're looking at how sleep affects hormone levels and weight and all that kind of thing. There's a lot going on in that area right now. And what they're saying is if you look at the average person, and I know that not everybody fits into that average, but the average person, they say, requires between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night, that 2-hour range, with the average being 8. So if you take a group of people and you put them in a sleep lab, and they've done this in studies, and they've not allowed them to sleep their full 7 hours, like wake them up after 6 hours of sleep, and they do it on 3 or 4 consecutive nights, what they see is their blood cortisol levels rise tremendously. And the result of that, of course, is their blood sugar rises along with the cortisol. In a young, healthy people that have been part of these experiments, they found that just after 3 or 4 nights of not getting enough sleep, their blood sugar levels have risen to the level where they're almost just a hair below diagnostic of prediabetes. That fast, young, healthy people. So imagine what chronic sleep deprivation, night after night after night, which is part of your lifestyle, what that can do. So you've got the cortisol effect, making you hungrier, making you burn fat slower, making you store fat faster. And then besides that, there are other hormones that come into play that have kind of more recently come out of research. There's a hormone called leptin, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of leptin, but that's a hormone that allows you to feel satisfied when you're eating. When you're eating food, it's the leptin that says, okay, I've had enough. Well, in chronically sleep-deprived people, their leptin levels are about 15% lower than normal. So that means that we're eating more before our bodies say, okay, I've had enough to eat. On the flip side of that, there's another hormone that's kind of the opposite of leptin. It's called ghrelin. It's G-H-R-E-L-I-N. And that's the hormone that makes us feel hungry when we haven't eaten. And people who are chronically sleep deprived, their ghrelin levels are about 15% above normal. So, you're hitting it from both ends. You got high ghrelin levels that are making you hungry. You got low leptin levels that aren't allowing you to feel satisfied at an appropriate time. And then you got the cortisol that's making you hungry all the time. So there's a lot to this whole sleep thing. So if you can find a way to sneak a few more hours into your week, it will absolutely pay off for you in a lot of positive ways. Now there's another thing about sleep. I almost hate to bring this up because nobody likes this, but when your body has to work to produce body heat, that's a calorie burning activity. So at night, think about what a lot of us do. We go home and we get under those comforters and we pull the covers up and, we're just like a little cocoon. Well, do you think your body's having to work to make any body heat at night? Those blankets are doing it for you. Your body's not having to do anything. And so remember what we talked about several weeks ago, the fact that at night you're probably burning about 500 calories under normal circumstances. But if you're like heavy, covered up with blankets, you're way, way, way under that. And I don't really have a good solid number to give you, but I read something recently that was kind of interesting. Not sure I totally buy into it completely, but this researcher says that when you cover up with heavy blankets, or in the winter you use an electric blanket, you cut your calorie burning down to 25% of what it would normally be, which is a huge difference. I mean, think of all the calories you could burn at night when you're asleep, not even aware of it, if you just slept a little lighter, took off one of the blankets, took off one of the heavy blankets and slept with a light blanket or a sheet, just to allow your body to have to work to do that. And that may be something you have to work into or kind of ease yourself into, because your body will adjust. But as I said, it's not something that people like to do, but it absolutely is a good idea. Okay, number 8 talks about avoiding long periods of inactivity. There's something that happens in the brain when we're inactive for long periods of time. And what they define, or they being the experts, define as a long period of time is an hour or more of sedentary activity. So sitting at your desk for an hour, sitting in this classroom for an hour, sitting at home on the couch watching TV, reading a book, anything where you're just sitting or lying for long periods of time. That sends a signal to the brain to slow down the fat burning and increase the fat storing. Especially television time. Now, you all have heard about the studies with children saying that increased television time is related to increased rates of obesity with children. You've all heard those studies. They've been around for a long, long, long time. We've known about that forever. But more recently, it's been studied in adults, and we're finding the same thing. And there's something that I don't totally fully understand. I've had it explained to me before, but it's something about the light waves coming off that TV screen into the eye and how it affects the brain activity, that it actually slows down metabolism. And that's why they're saying with kids, one of the best ways to prevent childhood obesity is to get them away from the TV and really limit that time, because not only are you slowing down that activity, but you're getting them off doing something more active, hopefully. There was an interesting study that I read about that had to do with college students watching television programs, and they had them hooked up to these machines that measure calories called indirect calorimeters. So they would establish a baseline calorie level, which we know is basal metabolic rate. We talked about that, the rate of calories your body burns when you're doing nothing, just flat out nothing. So they would establish that for each one of these participants, and then they would have them watch a 30-minute TV show, still hooked up to the machine. And what they found, which is really fascinating, is while they were watching that 30-minute television show, their metabolisms dropped down 15% below basal metabolism. Here we thought all these years basal was as low as you go, but yet with television watching, it goes down even lower. So it's sort of like we go into sort of like a trance-like state. I mean, even though you're alert and awake, your brain is in this trance. And so by decreasing the television time, you can increase that metabolism somewhat. Now, the new thing, though, that they're calling, the new terminology, is not television time, it's screen time. And as you would imagine, because now they're finding out computer screens do the exact same thing. So if you have kids that play computer games and these little game gadgets, and any like me and a lot of you, I sit in front of a computer screen most of the day. So, I have to be aware of that because that's having a huge effect on my metabolism. So I don't spend unnecessary time on the computer. I have to spend enough as it is. So I don't spend a lot of unnecessary time unless there's something I really want to do on the computer, just to get away from it and just to break that. Now, one thing you can do too, if you're working a desk job or a sedentary job and you're working on a project or you're doing something that does require you to work on it for long periods of time, you're going to have to get up and refill your water bottle at some point. You're going to need to go to the restroom at some point. At some point, you may need to talk to a coworker. So what I'll do, like for example, in this building, this is a 3-story building. My office is on the 2nd floor. So if I need to use the restroom, I'll walk up to the 3rd floor to the end of the hallway and use that restroom, or maybe go downstairs to refill my water bottle, or maybe instead of calling a coworker or sending an email, I'll get up and I'll physically walk to their desk to tell them whatever I need to tell them. So it's just a way to kind of force myself to get up out of my chair at least every hour, so I'm not just sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the exercise-related stuff, starting with muscle. Now, what have you learned about muscle?
It burns more than actual fat.
Yeah, muscle burns more calories than fat. In fact, it burns 50 times more calories than fat, ounce for ounce, pound for pound. So it's to everybody's advantage to have more muscle. Muscle's like your engine. If you got a big old gas guzzling car, it's going to consume more gas versus that little tiny economy car that, that could go weeks and weeks without filling a tank. Well, you want to be that big gas guzzling machine. And the way to do that is to turn into a muscle. And that's why men lose weight so much easier than women, because obviously biologically they have more muscle on their body. And that's the way it should be. We don't want you to turn into men, but for females in particular, and also men, in a good weight loss program, you will be put on a weight training program, because the goal there is to build up your muscle tissue. So if we're going to assume that every pound of muscle is going to burn 50 extra calories, which is our best guess at this point, if you can put on 5 pounds of muscle tissue, that's an extra 250 calories added to your burn for the day. And that's just that muscle sitting there on your body, even whether you exercise it or not, just because it sits there on your body, it's going to burn another 250 calories a day. And that's the thing that's really going to help you keep your weight off. It's one thing to lose weight, but then it's always a tough thing to maintain that. And it's that muscle tissue that's going to do that for you more than anything else. So, let's move on to number 10 and talk about your cardiovascular workout. And there are several things here we want to talk about. But this is an area where you can shift things up if you need to enhance your calorie burning. So the first thing on the list is the obvious thing, which is use your large muscles. Where are your large muscles? Down here, lower body muscles, as opposed to fingers and arms and all this kind of thing. Now, ounce for ounce, my finger muscles are going to burn as many calories as my leg muscles. But because my leg muscles are bigger, I can work them for longer without fatigue. If I'm going to sit here and do arm circles, these small arm muscles are going to fatigue pretty darn quick. I couldn't do a 45-minute arm circles. I'd just be, in 5 minutes I'm down. So obviously you're going to get more bang for your buck with your lower body muscles that can sustain longer periods of activity and burn more calories. So we know that's kind of a given. But now let's talk about exercise frequency. We recommend anywhere between 4 to 6 days a week as an optimal cardiovascular workout program. Now we're strictly talking cardio here. We're not talking weights. That's another thing all to itself. But just strictly cardio, 4 to 6 times a week. Now the typical workout regimen for a lot of people is 3 days a week, right? You hear that all the time. People come to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, 3 days a week doesn't cut it. That kind of gets you into your routine. It gets your body accustomed to exercising. You make some initial progress, but you find very, very quickly that 3 days a week turns into a maintenance level. And it's very hard to break that unless you increase your days to at least 4. So 4 being the minimum to get good results over the long haul, 5 being kind of intermediate, and that's why you hear us say so much, we want you exercising 5 days, because that's really the perfect happy medium. 6 days is even better. 7 days is too much. Everybody's body needs a day to rest and recuperate and for the muscles to just kind of settle down again. So we would never recommend 7 days a week of cardio to anybody, but 4 to 6 is really ideal. And let me show you why. If you look up here, there's a picture of a muscle cell. And in your muscle cell, you've got lots and lots of things going on, but one of the things that are in there are fat-burning enzymes. So these are obviously the things that burn fat for you. And that's again why muscle is such a calorie burning machine, because that's where the fat burning enzymes are. 90% of the calories you burn in a 24-hour period are burned in your muscle tissue. So in that muscle cell, these fat burning enzymes, in response to frequent repeated exercise, which by definition is at least 4 days a week, they begin to undergo changes. And what happens with them is they start getting bigger. They start growing. And then they get to a certain critical size and they divide up. They split up into two. So by exercising your muscles consistently, that cell gets full of nice, big, efficient fat-burning enzymes. So what that means for you now, you've been in this program several weeks now, so you're sitting in this classroom, you're sitting in the same chairs, it's the same 1-hour class, but yet because you are now so much better conditioned, because your muscle cells have started undergoing some changes, you're burning more fat this hour, this day, than you were week number 1, sitting here in these same chairs, because your muscles have changed. Make sense? Now the next thing has to do with how long you exercise. And we're going to look at the bottom of the chart here to explain this. So what you see here is a chart that shows potentially a 1-hour workout. Down at the bottom is minutes of exercise. So you've got 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And over here to the left, you have your fuel sources. And anytime you're exercising, you're burning some kind of a mix of sugar and fat. Rarely 100% of any one, but usually a mix. So those are your two fuel sources. But the one thing you can burn exclusively 100% of is sugar. So like when you get up out of this chair to walk out of the room, your first 10 seconds are powered exclusively by sugar. Pure sugar burning just to get you up and going. Because sugar is that quick burning fuel. It's immediately available, it burns hot, and it goes away really fast. So that's always going to be the first to kick in. But the fat doesn't start burning right away. That takes a while. So what you see here is when you're doing a good cardiovascular workout according to your proper heart rate zone, at about 15 minutes into it, that's when you break even. That's when your body's burning about equal amounts of fat and sugar. So it's about 50% fat, 50% sugar at the 15-minute mark. But then as you go on beyond the 15 minutes and approach 30, that's when you max out. And I may not have drawn this exactly in proportion, but you max out at the 30-minute mark. That's where you're burning the most amount of fat your body's capable of burning and the least amount of sugar that you're capable of burning. Now what you see here is that the red line starts at the top, but it doesn't completely bottom out, does it? And the blue line, the fat, starts at the very bottom, but it never goes to the very top. This is the best you're going to achieve. You're going to get about 80% of your calories coming from fat, about 20% coming from sugar, under the best of circumstances with a good cardiovascular workout. And the reason for that is because sugar must be present in order for fat to burn. If you remove the sugar, which comes from the carbohydrate in your diet, if you take that out of the chemical equation, fat immediately stops burning. It comes to a complete standstill, a complete halt. So you must always have sugar present. That's one of the reasons we say that low-carb diets are so stupid, because you need that carbohydrate, you need that sugar to power that fat burning. So that's your goal, is to go at least 30 minutes, and that's why you always hear us say that here. But then, once you get to your 30 minutes, you'll start hearing your trainer say, okay, now we want you to start going more. You know, they're not just hounding you, there's a reason for that, because if you finally maxed out, why stop there? If you're able to, why not keep going for at least another 10 or 15 minutes? So we would always say at least exercise 30 minutes. That's your bare minimum. If you're in school, you get a C if you do that. You know, it's kind of like, okay, you're doing okay, but we really want you to get the A or the B. So we want you to go about 45 minutes. 60 is really your maximum. For cardiovascular exercise, there's not a whole lot of reason for anybody to go beyond 60 minutes. Now, athletes in training may do that, but you know, most of us are not athletes. Most of us are just normal people exercising to stay fit, to get in shape, to lose some weight. And once you go beyond an hour, you know, what begins to happen is your body starts to feel the stress of it. You start getting stress fractures, you start getting burnout, you start getting injuries. And that's not what we're after. So we really do want to keep it within that specified zone, with 30 being the absolute lowest, 60 being the absolute highest for a good cardiovascular workout. Now, intensity is another thing you want to think about, and that's what you measure by your heart rate. And all of you are working with your exercise trainers and exercise specialists, and hopefully they've told you what your target heart rate range is. The reason for that, the reason for prescribing a heart rate range, is that below your target heart rate range, you're burning so few calories, it's almost not worth the effort. Above that target heart rate range, you're exercising at such a high intensity that what happens is this sugar burning starts to dominate. You start slowing down the fat burning and increase the sugar burning. If your goal is to lose body fat, you want to maximize that fat burning, so you do want to pay attention to that heart rate range and stay within that zone. And of course, as high in the zone as you can tolerate, so you'll burn more calories, but definitely within that zone. So always pay attention to the target heart rate. How many of you are familiar with the concept of cross-training? And what is cross-training?
Tricks to kind of make your body do different movements and not keep it consistent.
Where your body's doing different movements. Or what it might be, like a simple definition, is riding a bike one day and walking the next day. Or coming to the gym and spending 15 minutes on the treadmill, 15 minutes on the exercise bike, 15 minutes on the cross trainer, just so you mix it up. That's what cross training is it's using different parts of the body. Now remember the muscle cell thing? It's only the muscles that get worked that change. So if you come in every day and you ride an exercise bike, which is a great cardiovascular exercise, it meets all the definitions, it uses big lower body muscles, you can sustain it for a long period of time, you can get your heart rate up in your zone by doing an exercise bike, but if that's all you ever do, pretty much the only muscles that ever get fit are those big quadriceps muscles. A little bit in the back of the legs, but not a whole lot. So if you want to really become a good fat burning machine, work your whole body. Do different exercises on different days where by the end of the week your whole body's been worked, so all your muscle cells can begin to change and undergo that transition. Now there's another concept here that I didn't list and we haven't talked about yet called interval training. Anybody familiar with that? And can you tell me what it is? Because some of you are doing it now. Okay, what's interval training? So you take your heart rate up and then you take it down, yeah. So the specific term they use now is called high energy interval training, HIIT, high intensity interval training. And that is just like we said, that for short periods of time during your cardio workout, you up your intensity. Now you're upping it to a level that you could never sustain that your whole workout, but you're just upping it until you go, okay, I've got to slow down. And then you slow down and recover a little bit, and then you up it again. And as you get fitter and fitter, that high intensity time can be longer and longer, but it should never be your whole workout. When you're very, very, very fit, what it might be is like a 1-to-1 ratio, where for a minute you're at high intensity and a minute you're recovering. A minute you're at high intensity, a minute you're recovering. When you're first starting off, it might be more like a 1-to-4 ratio, where you're high intensity for a minute and you recover for 4. High intensity for a minute, recover for 4, that kind of thing. But you get tremendous benefit out of that, and exercise physiologists will tell you that is the #1 best way to boost your metabolism, is to do interval training. You can do it on the exercise bike, you can do it when you're walking, you can do it on a treadmill, and whatever it is, your high intensity may be different from the person next to you. It depends on your fitness level, what you're capable of. Whatever feels high intensity to you is your high intensity training. So keep that in mind. And how many of you are doing that now? Okay, a lot of you are good, that's great. And that's the reason that they have you doing that, because it is so effective. So, any questions then about what we talked about tonight? Yes?
You know, they say that there's that fat burning heart rate zone and then the cardiovascular burning zone. Does that carb and sugar and fat scale do the same?
The heart
rate and not in the cardiovascular?
The cardio zone and the weight loss zone on the machines are very similar, because they do keep you in that zone. They'll keep you, the fat burning zone will keep you a little bit lower in your intensity. That's probably the lower one, so you know, you may not want to be at that one all the time because it never lets you get way up there.
But that's the same as far as the time?
Yeah, that's what you're getting here in your cardio and fat burning workouts. You're getting a pattern that looks like this. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Yes?
How soon after waking up do you eat for breakfast? Is there a pattern?
The magic time period is that you should eat breakfast within 60 minutes after waking up. And if you miss that, your metabolism goes down. So 60 minutes. And you know, we talked about the fact that some people are early morning exercisers and you know, what are you going to do? Eat a full breakfast and then go work out? Well, probably not. So if that's the case, just remember, eat something. Have a small glass of juice, have a banana, have a piece of toast, have a half an energy bar, have a little something to get you going for your exercise, and then after your exercise, then have what we would call a full breakfast with your protein, grain, and produce, your 3-food group breakfast.
Did you say something more protein?
Something more protein. The question is,
Should
should it be more protein based? No. Your first feeding should be more carbohydrate based, because what you need is fuel for your workout. You don't need to be building and repairing muscles. You need the fuel. So make it be. That's why I said like fruit or a piece of toast or a glass of juice, because that's a high carb kind of food that would fill your tank and give you the energy to work out with. And then you can have the protein with your main breakfast. And somebody in the back had a question? No?
Well, to add
Yes.
on to that, then is it, if you're not gonna go work out, is it better to have like a protein bar? 'Cause like a protein
If you're
bar-
not going to get up and go work out in the
like,
morning,
Before I go to work, a lot of times I eat a protein bar and it'll be 12 hours at work.
a protein bar is an okay breakfast. It doesn't compare to real food. It never ever will. No kind of canned or packaged drink or product will ever take the place of real food, but it's an okay backup. If it's either that or nothing, I would say yes, have a protein bar or an energy bar as a meal replacement.
Well, the Kellogg's makes the protein meal now, protein bar meal.
Right, and if you can buy the protein
like
bar
10
meals,
grams of
it's the
protein.
same type of deal that it still doesn't compare to having a real food breakfast. Better to have cereal with milk and fruit, but it's an okay alternative. It's kind of like those frozen dinners, you know, they're not the best nutrition, but they're a pretty good plan B. Not something I would say plan to do it every day of your life, but let it be your backup plan.
And I had another question. On this minutes exercise here, like if you're, I know that you just said 60 minutes, but if you wanted to run like say a half marathon or something, you know how they encourage the little jelly beans and the little sugar things or whatever? What does that do to that graph right there when you eat those things, like if you're out on a race?
Well, her question had to do with what if you're doing something like marathon training where you're going to be doing a long endurance kind of activity, and what people typically do with those is they carry gel packs or goo they call it, or some kind of jelly beans, some kind of really super high concentrated sugar carbohydrate source, and you're asking what does that do to this pattern? It just allows a person to keep going, because if they don't take those products, they don't have enough carbohydrate in their system to keep going, and so they're going to bottom out. And that
But
whole
it doesn't do anything to the fat burn then?
now by consuming those high carbohydrate supplements, it allows them to continue burning fat. That's why they have to do that. So that's a good thing. Now that's only for marathon runners and long. That's not saying we should be carrying jelly beans on the treadmill. And okay, you all got that right. Okay. Okay, everybody, that's it.